Welcome to Alex Gordon Audios. What if the future was not a destination, but an echo? A whisper cast back through the currents of time? What if a message, born from the death of a galaxy, could travel to its very dawn? Tonight, we journey to Luna, to a hidden vault, where the fate of humanity is sealed within 20 wombs. But when chaos comes to claim its due, salvation arrives from an impossible source, the future itself. This is the beginning. This is Imperium Ascendant. Settle in and witness how destiny is undone. Chapter 1. Paradox Undone. Date 750 M30. Location: a hidden vault within Luna. Luna was where mankind first touched the cosmos. The first mark they left when they ascended from their cradle to explore the stars. It was only fitting it would be where mankind's ascension started. In shadows of the old night, the newly crowned emperor of mankind started a possible project within Luna, using his own genius and the resources of newly conquered Terra and Luna. He sought to create beings that would guide mankind along the shining path. The results of this great endeavor were 20 artificial wombs, each containing a fetal transhuman, greater than even anything crafted. Born of millennia of scientific discovery, warp craft stolen from the Imperium, and the very blood of the anathema, these Primarchs were built to be the heroes of a new age, an age of Imperium, where humanity was ascendant and no longer feared the darkness. A noble ambition, but other forces stood in opposition to the newly crowned master of mankind. The primordial annihilator sought to claim these infant Primarchs, to warp them from paragons of mankind to tools of doom and darkness. Reality shimmered as space-time was distorted by a warp rift. The ruinous powers had gambled everything on this, an Imperium-born paradox that would seal both the galaxy and the anathema's fate. Using Sons of the 17 Legion and the insanity of warp currents, they planned to pluck the 20 Primarchs from safety and twist them however they pleased. Arjul Tal and his brothers of the Serrated Sun chapter exited the rift, stunned and disjointed by the flickering visions and movements through reality. Arjul Tal attempted to identify his surroundings to no avail. The oily voice of Ingethil the Ascended poured into his mind. Secrets and lies were pumped into him like a serpent's venom. Like the puppets they were, the word-bearers moved forward with a stiff, halting gait, not known to Astartes, with their faith in the Emperor shattered fully, and the primordial truth laid bare. Tal knew what must be done. Moving slowly past the glass wombs, he pulled forth his blade and advanced on the Geller field generator at the center of the chamber. The true gods would save the Primarchs from the false emperor, and his father would be vindicated. In his stupor, he lifted his blade and prepared to destroy the only defense the infant demigods had from the predators of the warp. Right as his blade began its downward arch, the warp stirred again. Ingethil let out a screech when she felt the power and its source. At the other end of the chamber from the Serrated Sun's portal, another gash in the Materium opened up. Not a gash that wept corruption and chaos like the first. This one burnt with holy fire. Ingethil began to quake her daemonic form, weakening under the pressure coming from the rift. Anathema. The anathema has come. The newly born Daemon Prince wailed in horror and fear as the aura of the being her kind feared above all burst forth from the portal. The word-bearers sensed it too, and as one their hackles raised at the false emperor's presence. The pain and humiliation of Monarchia was a fresh wound in their transhuman memories. Yet even the word-bearers who had been witness to the emperor's wrath were shocked by the energy leaking from the rift. While the power unleashed on Monarchia had been far more brutal and unrestrained than the usual psychic aura the emperor gave off, this was far worse. It was a nova of sheer psychic dominion, unfettered by mortal constraints. It bathed the chamber in a white light that seared the minds and souls of the heretic Astartes. Ingethil buckled under the scalding light, and her form was hurled, screeching back into the warp. With their portal collapsing and their guide gone, the word-bearers were lost and confused. Their pilgrimage of enlightenment had turned into a trap. The worst for them was yet to come, though, for this warp rift was not meant to banish Ingethil or protect the infant Primarchs from chaotic taint, but to transport a chosen few through time and space to avenge themselves and save the Imperium. The Legion of the Damned had come to change destiny. A bolt of fire erupted throughout the laboratory as the Damned opened fire on the word-bearers. Diving for cover, the traitor Astartes were pinned down by constant volleys of burning ammunition. A number of them had been too late to react to the sudden appearance of ghostly burning Astartes, and were now reduced to hunks of burning meat and bubbling blood. Recovering first, Tal ordered his battle brothers to open fire on the phantoms while avoiding the infant Primarchs. Bolt shells whizzed past the gestation capsules as the firefight continued. Alarms and klaxon began to wail, adding to the frantic chaos. Slowly but surely, the Legion of the Damned moved closer and closer to the embattled heretics. Peering behind his cover, Argyll Tal noticed the number on the gestation capsule. One of the Damned hid behind, 13. Struck by grim inspiration, he fired his bolt pistol at the womb of what would be Guilliman, attempting to kill two birds with one infernal shell. Moving faster than what was thought possible for an Astartes, one of the legionaries threw himself in front of the shell. It punctured the ghostly Astartes' armor, and he flickered out of the materium like a candle snuffed out by the wind. Tal's transhuman eyes noticed something particular about the martyred enemy. His armor may be burnt and blackened, but the inverted omega on his pauldron was still barely visible. Sons of Guilliman always willing to follow their arrogant father, he thought to himself before barking orders to his sons. Target the capsules marked 16, 7, 11, 13, 18, and 19, he barked. Tal knew his purpose here was to allow the gods to claim the Primarchs, but if he could not do that, then at least he could cripple the false emperor and eliminate threats to his father and his legion before they even existed. Or at the very least, allow these phantoms to martyr themselves, saving what might be their future gene fathers. Argyll Tal's hypothesis was correct. Legionnaire after legionnaire stood in front of the incoming fire to protect the infant Primarchs. Yet even with these casualties, these blacked, flame-ensorcelled saviors still advanced on the word-bearers, butchering the heretics with bolt fire, and even their blades if they got close enough to a straggling one. What had been a slaughter became a pitched battle between the rows of gestation capsules. After 10 minutes that seemed to last 10 hours, only a handful of damned legionnaires, along with Tal and his 3 remaining Sir-awaited sons. Word-bearer corpses and bolter shells littered the room, while the chamber's doors quaked with the attempts of outside Imperial forces attempting to breach the sealed laboratory. Cursing in Colchizian, Tal barked orders to his remaining battle brothers. They were running out of time. Even if they won this battle, the false emperor's slaves would kill them instead. Ordering his brothers to retreat, they charged towards the Gellerfield generator, hoping to salvage their original objective. One heretic stayed behind to provide covering fire. He screamed maddened Colchizian prayers as flaming bolter rounds tore him to pieces. The remaining 3 charged towards the generator as the Legion of the Damned pursued. A volley of flaming ammunition ripped apart another word-bearer, but they were so close, mere meters away from salvation and humanity's eyes being opened to the primordial truth. His desperate hope would not come to pass, however, for while the firefight raged, one last being exited the Legion of the Damned's portal. He now stood in between the last 2 heretics and the generator, towering over both Astartes, with armor as burnt and blackened as the others. It was still unmistakably a Custodes. With a single slash of his burning guardian spear, Tal's last remaining brother was dead, and he stood alone against a blackened burning ghost of the Emperor's foremost warriors. For a split second, Argyll Tal and the Custodes stared at each other. Tears of molten metal trickled from the Custodes' visor as recognition dawned upon the serrated sun's captain. Aquilon, he wondered, fear and trepidation creeping into his voice. As soon as those fateful words of recognition left his mouth, the guardian spear of the vengeful Custodes parted his head from his body. Chapter 2. Message in a Bottle. The sealed doors to the laboratory exploded inwards in a shower of smoke and sparks. Soldiers of the nascent Imperium along with frantic genesmiths rushed into the chamber, searching for the source of the alarm and source of the bolter fire. The soldiers noticed the fallen word-bearers' positions around them, looking warily at the strange warriors and preparing to fill the corpses with rounds, if any. These trespassers were still alive. The genesmiths, in turn, frantically scrambled to the various data readouts and monitors attached to the gestation capsules. The great work could not be damaged. Too much had been done to ensure the Primarch's birth. If they had been damaged or contaminated, trillions would die begging for saviors stolen from them. The sealed doors to the laboratory exploded inwards in a shower of smoke and sparks. Soldiers of the nascent Imperium, along with frantic genesmiths, rushed into the chamber, searching for the source of the alarm and source of the bolter fire. The soldiers noticed the fallen word-bearers' positions around them, looking warily at the strange warriors and preparing to fill the corpses with rounds, if any. These trespassers were still alive. Chapter 2. Message in a Bottle. A third party soon entered the chamber. An old man cloaked in ragged robes, flanked by golden-armored giants. The soldiers and generites instantly snapped to attention at the sight of the Sigillite and the Custodes guard. Malcador's wizened eyes scanned the chamber, while his mind's eye did the same. These corpses stunk of the great enemy, no denying that. Worse still, a chaotic portal had been opened in this most secret and protected chamber. Malcador quickly used his formidable psychic powers to cleanse the chamber of Neverborn's corruption. Yet something else hung in the chamber. Another aura that was much fainter than the chaotic taint had been obscured until Malcador purified the chamber, and he could tell that it was radically different from the seeping chaotic cancer that clung to the primordial annihilator's minions and tools. This aura mystified Malcador. It was equal parts familiar and horrifically alien, moving through the chamber with speed that a man of his age and bearing should not possess. The Sigillite followed the strange psychic signal through the rows of infant Primarchs. The source was quickly identified. It was a point where reality and the warp had once intersected. Malcador was no stranger to warp rifts, both open and shut. But this particular rip in the materium was new. Unlike the ugly wounds rent open by the Neverborn and their minions, this rift had been both carefully cut open and then sealed, akin to a surgical cut that had been sutured. The place where the rift once had been did not weep corruption, but instead soft golden energy slowly emanated from it. Reaching out to the rift, Malcador touched the metaphysical suture with his mind. The Sigillite was suddenly cast backward in an explosion of psychic power that threw the ancient psyker a dozen feet or more. Even as the old man was thrown back from the rift, the Custodes reacted faster than unaugmented eyes could detect and moved to Malcador, attempting to assist him. Quickly moving to his feet before the Custodes could help him, Malcador telekinetically summoned his staff that lay on the ground next to him. Calmly as if nothing had happened, he quickly left the chamber, giving orders for the tainted corpses to be sealed away in one of the warded cells meant for the most tainted and twisted artifacts of the old night, and for a permanent detachment of Custodes to be placed in the chamber of the Primarchs. Despite his calm demeanor, Malcador was worried. He had felt an incredible psychic presence from the sutured portal, far beyond anything he had ever witnessed in his incredibly long lifetime. Yet the power was not what disturbed him. It was what the power resembled. It felt like a twisted, magnified version of his Liege's power. When he touched the rift, his mind had been bombarded with a massive amount of information and psychic power. In his long life, Malcador had encountered similar things. Psychic beacons created to transfer information directly into the brain of a worthy recipient. The beacon had even seemed to consider Malcador worthy to open it, seeing as it didn't try to detonate his brain and that of everyone's within a mile radius. Yet it seemed that Malcador simply lacked the power to tap into the beacon's knowledge. The nature of the anomaly was bizarre, even for the already strange phenomena it was. It was weaved into the rift itself, and then sealed into the veil between reality and the warp. This form of metaphysical psychic surgery was something beyond Malcador's capabilities, or virtually anyone or anything else's for that matter. The amount of psychic control and power this must have taken was possible to only one being in the known universe. This message had come from the anathema. Yet Malcador's liege and friend was busy negotiating with the new leadership of the Yindonesic bloc, and would have no need to send such a cryptic and inaccessible message. or at least would have informed Malkador of this. Location: Hive, Jakar, capital of the Yindonesic bloc. The First Lord of Terror knew one thing for certain. The Emperor of Mankind must be made aware of this. The Sigillite knew. He could decipher the beacon's message and learn the secrets locked away with the infant Primarchs. Malkador moved quickly through the passages and chambers of the lunar labs as he journeyed to the shuttle port. He needed to return to Terra and speak with the Emperor immediately, even if this beacon was a contingency that the Sigillite was not privy to. The chaotic incursion raised more questions. How had their portal been opened? How did they know where the project was? What were the things they sent through the portal? They were obviously gene-crafted monsters, but the designs of their armor and what little of their biology Malkador had seen disturbingly reminded him of the Thunder Warriors and the Custodes themselves. Something worrying was occurring, and Malkador had theories but no concrete evidence about what all of this was. A palpable silence filled the chamber as the Emperor of Mankind watched his quarry through golden eyes that shone like miniature stars. He had met countless of their ilk throughout his impossibly long lives, not monsters or butchers, but the servants of such. More often than not, they never directly killed, but were obedient little cogs in great machines of death and destruction. As much as he would have preferred to kill these spineless fools who had allowed millions, if not billions, to die, and now could only offer "I was just following orders" as a defense. They had kept the wheels of twisted evil governments running, and he needed these little cogs in his infant imperium. Slowly rising to his feet, the Emperor began to slowly pace the chamber, dictating his terms of surrender. They would serve and submit, or be destroyed like so many others. The cogs gave it half a second's thought before bowing before their new master. After giving the most capable of them new roles in the governance of this territory, he left the chamber, letting the new elite of Hive Jakar collapse in relief with the knowledge they would not face the same fate as their previous masters. The inner sanctum of Indonesia was a massive, ornate chamber. The very walls were encrusted in gems and covered with colossal religious murals that were being removed even as the future of the nation was being decided below. A grand oaken table was the centerpiece of the chamber, where once countless demagogues and tyrants had bickered and argued over their fiefdom. Now, half of it was occupied by the provisional government that had formed after the fall of Cardinal Tang. All of them were in various states of fear and stress, directed towards the being occupying the other half of the table, the figure who was both their conqueror and their judge. He alone would decide their fate. Would they be cast down and broken like so many other warlords of terror, or would they be spared to serve this new conqueror? It's from the Lord Sigillite. There has been an incident on Luna, and with that, the master of mankind became lost in dark thoughts. Had the Four come to collect? Had he lost his greatest allies and generals before they were even born? The Emperor knew that Chaos would attempt to steal his creations at some point, but the barriers in and around the laboratories were some of the finest crafted in galactic history. Something massive had gone wrong. Entering his shuttle with the Custodes, he left the hive preparing to journey to Luna. Flanked by Custodes, the Emperor walked briskly to his waiting shuttle. Most of Terra was now under his rule, and construction of the various buildings in the Himalayas was on schedule. The shining path was still open to him, and with every day that passed, he allowed himself just the smallest amount of hope that the darkest, most horrific futures he had seen would not come to pass. Valdor quickly approached him and bowed to his creator and king, giving the signal to his friend and closest bodyguard to rise. The Captain General quickly gave a sealed datapad to the Emperor. Unsealing the datapad, the Emperor used his beyond superhuman intellect to absorb pages of information in milliseconds. Constantine Valdor watched his lord scan the documents as the shuttle rocketed into orbit. A strange noise left the Emperor's throat, and Valdor looked up in concern, fearing some pathogen or poison had slipped through security. It took Valdor's heavily modified and trained mind a solid second to recognize the noise the Emperor was making. It was a chuckle. The Emperor of Mankind was laughing as he read the message his closest advisor had sent. He could feel the future shifting. He could feel the shining path widen, and humanity's survival becoming a little more likely. Chapter 3. Death Knell. The shuttle sped out of Terra's orbit, headed towards the shining crescent of Luna. Thinking back to a similar moment in the distant past, the Emperor allowed himself a moment of reminiscence of that fateful summer day when he watched the first human to set foot on Luna from mission control. Snapping back to the present, the Emperor began to speak with Valdor. There has been an incursion in the laboratory. The great enemy attempted to steal the project, but they were stopped by an unknown actor who left a psychic beacon in the chamber. Stranger still, Malcador believes the beacon is meant for me alone and has some interesting theories about its origin. Valdor stiffened at the news of the incursion and immediately began planning more through security measures. "What does the Lord Sigillite theorize it is?" asked the Captain General. The Emperor's lips formed a grim smile as he responded. "He thinks it's from me, or at least a version of me. The psychic signal the beacon let off is close to my own, and stranger things have occurred in the galaxy." The Emperor's eyes began to glow softly as he formed a mental link with Valdor in order to not just tell but show him all he needed to know. The currents of the warp have always been dangerous and bizarre. Even during the Golden Age, it was not unheard of vessels arriving before they left, or worlds obscured by warp storms to experience time differently. It's not inconceivable this is a message cast from some distant future as a warning or trap. "A trap," responded Valdor. He and his fellow custodes had faced countless forms of warp trickery, including skin witches, flesh formers, and other warp-empowered horrors impersonating the Emperor, and the idea of a weapon designed solely to hurt his liege brought forth the closest thing to tranquil fury a custodes could properly feel. Continuing, the Emperor showed countless more snippets of knowledge and data to his bodyguard as he spoke. "Yes, this might be some twisted thing created by the Four in the warp to ensnare me. It could even be something cast from an alternate reality, research that ended badly towards the end of the Dark Age, or perhaps something hitherto unseen by human eyes." Valdor saw thousands of realities and futures laid before him, and watched many snuffed out by monsters and abominations his creative sought to deny. Countless realities had died thanks to the multitude of threats, both material and immaterial, that haunt the universe. Valdor was the most exalted of the custodes, and had been given the privilege of seeing some of the knowledge and wisdom his Emperor possessed numerous times. But it still disoriented him to have his consciousness even momentarily stretched to the macroscopic view that the Emperor held of history and existence. Continuing to speak, the Emperor mused to himself. Malcador seemed to believe time travel is involved. He described the psychic signal as both similar to mine and horribly distorted, as if it had been both bleached of intricacies and grotesquely amplified. The shuttle continued its journey to Luna uneventfully as the Emperor and Valdor discussed the last phase of the unification of Terra, along with possible security measures to prevent another attempt on the Primarchs. A few short hours passed, and they were on the final approach to Luna. The Emperor fondly remembered ancient times when to touch Terra's moon was considered all but impossible, and how glorious it had been when a single small step for man opened up giant leaps for mankind. This peaceful recollection was shattered when the shuttle came within a few miles of Luna's surface. The Emperor's peerless psychic senses detected something strange deep within the moon below. Something that, despite being trapped beneath miles of sanctified and fortified stone and steel, still called out to him. Landing within a hangar hidden from prying eyes near Luna's North Pole, the Emperor and his custodes left the shuttle and prepared to descend into the bowels of the ancient laboratories where wonders and horrors of genetic artistry were created. Not a soul was to be found, all diverted to allow the ruler of both Terra and Luna absolute secrecy. The Emperor and his guards soon approached the laboratory, where the Primarchs had been crafted and now grew. Waiting for them was the withered form of Malcador, the Sigillite. After bowing to his master and friend, Malcador began to speak. "I take it the situation in the Indonesic bloc was resolved." Giving a curt nod of confirmation, the Emperor then locked eyes with Malcador, and for a brief second, the two greatest psychers in the galaxy touched minds. To those with the psychic sense to detect the momentary connection where memories and secrets were exchanged between the old friends, it would have appeared like a lightning bolt traveling between their souls. Instantly, other details that Malkador had feared to send, even though the most secure channels entered the Emperor's mind, while in turn new knowledge and plans related to the burgeoning Imperium entered Malkador's. This method allowed the two to work in almost perfect unison in their frantic struggle to allow humanity a shot at surviving the horrors of the galaxy. Malkador joined the Emperor's entourage as they silently entered the laboratory where the Imperium's greatest secret was kept. Servitors had already cleaned away most signs of the battle that had been fought here less than 48 hours ago. All that remained were discolored patches of wall and floor where bolter holes had been patched, and strange scorch marks that no amount of scrubbing could remove. Slowly walking past the gestation capsules, the Emperor eyed his creations. He mused on how close he had come to losing them to the Neverborn, and wondered what twisted mockeries of his ambition would have been born from these 20 transhumans. The custodes retreated to the entrance and corners of the room to stand guard over their master and his magnum opus. Flanked by Malkador and Valdor, the Emperor reached the end of the chamber where reality and the warp touched. The semi-closed rift leaked energy that crackled and lapped at the air in the form of distorted flames. The Emperor had sensed the rift and the energy from orbit, but only now when he had passed through the countless wards and defenses built into the very structure of the lab did he feel it in its entirety. In a moment that Valdor would remember for the rest of his existence, the Emperor paused mid-stride as the nature of the energy became fully apparent to him. The psychic aura cascaded over the Emperor as his impossibly developed psychic perception analyzed it, and the ancient transhuman's mind realized what it was. It was the spiritual death scream of a psyker, the final warp-born howl of a dying, powerful psychic as its soul left its body. That alone would never be enough to shock the master of mankind, for he had personally been the cause of multiple Alpha-class psykers emitting such a thing. What disturbed him was that the scream was his. Not even Malkador had realized the nature of the signal, for not even the anathema of chaos could envision his own death. For even in the worst possible future, the countless seers of the galaxy witnessed, the Lord of Perpetuals was a constant. Slowly speaking to his twin advisors and friends, the Emperor dictated instructions for how they should proceed. "It's genuine. This is no trap but a message sent to me. Only I am capable of receiving it. Malkador, be prepared to enact contingencies. Terminus, Starchild, Secundus, Malice, and Dragon." Malkador's eyes shot open as every single worst-case scenario plan he and his master had developed was mentioned, and that whatever this message was, it could trigger them. Malkador spoke up with an almost pleading voice. "My lord, if this is that dangerous, isn't it better to destroy this message, rather than let whatever purpose it holds be fulfilled?" Quietly, in a voice that ordered the death of worlds and planned the salvation of species, the master of mankind said, "Its purpose is to save humanity, and if that requires damning me, I will gladly do it 1,000 times over." And with that, the Emperor of mankind reached out to the beacon and touched the mind of its creator. Chapter 4. Corpse Emperor. The Emperor felt his mind being pulled into the beacon, beckoning him to meet with the being beyond the rift. With a deep shuddering breath, the master of mankind took the plunge. A flash of golden light filled the chamber, and reality shifted. Malkador and Valdor both braced themselves in fear as the light swallowed their master. The Emperor's eyes shot open. He had delved into the beacon, and wherever he was, this too was part of the message. The first thing he noticed was the smell. Incense and ozone hung in the air in an overpowering amount. The Emperor was grimly reminded of the countless cathedrals he had visited and destroyed. The second thing was the truly obscene amount of psychic pressure in the room. His supernatural and physical senses were both muffled by the bombardment of excessive stimuli. He scanned the chamber around him in the hazy half-light, attempting to get his bearings. The Emperor was standing at the foot of a gigantic staircase that ascended a truly massive pyramid of machinery and religious iconography. A scowl settled on the emperor's face as he walked towards the stairs. He was obviously in some sort of temple of obscene opulence and meaning to whatever misguided fools created it. As he reached the first step, he was startled by what at first he had assumed were statues standing on either side of the first step. They were custodes, unmistakable in their ornate armor. The emperor recognized them as Heteron Guard, his nature as a psychic projection masking him from their view. He observed this counterpart to his companions. They were practically identical, except for a single worrying detail. Their cloaks were not the flowing red of the custodes he knew, but a ragged black raiment of grief. Horrific realization poured over the emperor's mind as the nature of the massive chamber he was in became evident. It was a tomb, his tomb. Wherever or whatever was the source of the beacon, it came from a place where he had fallen. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, the emperor knew what must be done and began to ascend the pyramid. Slowly but surely, he climbed the artificial mountain. The psychic aura was only becoming stronger, and the emperor could feel the storm of energy buffet his mind, body, and soul. Every 100 steps there were twin platforms on either side of the stairs. A custodes stood on each platform flanking the steps. The emperor grimaced as he looked at these doppelgangers. Every pair seemed to be more injured and damaged. The first pair he noticed with damage had small scorch marks on them. But as he ascended, the damage became much more apparent. Their golden armor was blackened and twisted, no longer the ornate war gear of his closest companions, but broken slag clinging to decrepit transhumans. Trying to shake off the growing feeling of unease that gripped him, the emperor continued his ascent with gritted teeth. The psychic inferno raging at the top of the pyramid stung his skin and soul as he approached. The sheer amount of psychic energy pouring off whatever sat at the top of this structure could boil the blood of lesser beings and snuff out their souls like a candle in a gale. The emperor was getting close to the top. A few 100 steps, and he would reach the peak of this grotesque monument. The next pair of custodes he saw made him stop for a second. The one on the left had impaled himself on his guardian's spear. It stuck through his shoulder as a morbid crutch to keep the transhuman warrior standing upright. The one to the right had his armor had fused with the floor, and its occupant seemed to be slowly burning to death inside. Yet despite the clear pain and torture both men were under, neither one of them moved or made so much as a sound. Cursing under his breath, the emperor sped forward past the broken guardians, moving with superhuman speed up the last bit of the staircase, not stopping to look at the remaining custodes. Every second spent in this broken reality, where his companions were reduced to such a state, and his tomb had become a temple, grated on the emperor's mind. Whatever this message was, it must contain answers to what created this realm. After hours of climbing, the emperor of mankind reached the summit. The psychic energy that pressed upon his soul had reached a new level of intensity. Reality shimmered and seemed to burn under the mass of raw mental and spiritual power pouring forth. Gathering his energies to cloak himself, the emperor approached the scalding psychic light. He could feel the death howl far more clearly now, and a shiver ran up the emperor's spine as his psychic senses detected something new to the psychic scream. His psychic wail was part of it, the loudest and most horrific by far, but not the only one, not even close. A chorus of agony and death echoed with his own. Millions, if not billions, of individual psychic screams could be heard in the warp-born cacophony. Finally, he was close enough to cut through the psychic and physical miasma that obscured his senses, and the nature of the pyramid and its capstone became apparent. It was a truly massive machine that funneled colossal amounts of energy into a throne. The throne often seen in the emperor's own visions. The throne that would be humanity's salvation and the path to ascension. Slowly, the emperor approached the massive object. Scalding psychic light cascaded off of the throne, obscuring the emperor's senses as he approached. Then finally, when he stood directly before it, he could see its occupant freely. For the first time in millennia, the master of mankind wept. The thing on the throne was grotesque, a rotting, broken corpse held together by sheer psychic might and technology that should have been left forgotten in ages past. Thousands of innocents were fed mind, body, and soul to the husk. This abomination, stuck on the precipice of death, disgusted the Emperor. It was an undead monster filled with more psychic power than anything he had ever seen, that screamed a never-ending death knell of despair and agony. The thing on the throne was him, fighting back the urge to wrench the transhuman champion of the human species. Felt an emotion once thought gone to him, fear. Something somewhere had not just killed him, but distorted him into a psychic parasite that fed off of others to prolong the inevitable. This corpse on the throne was worshipped like a god. Not just any god, but the worst kind of deity that the Emperor had spent so long trying to defeat. It was failure incarnate, the manifestation of all his worst fears and doubts. Falling to his knees, the stunned Emperor of mankind could not help but wonder aloud. How? That single word, filled with distress and fear, hung in the colossal chamber for a long and terrible moment. How had his dream failed so horribly? In this twisted place, he had been reduced to a corpse on the edge of life and death, in some sort of macabre temple of sacrifice. Millions of thoughts swirled through his transhuman mind. Someone had brought him here to see this, someone powerful. It was not the ruinous powers. For all their power and schemes, they held no purchase on him, and such tricks and traps could never reach this level of intricacy. No, this was not an illusion, but some other time or place. The remaining candidates for the beacon's creation were equally worrying. The dragon of Mars, one of his wayward children, a future Primarch, a surviving Elder One, or a last desperate call from the corpse in front of him in order to prevent this future. Before the Emperor could continue his stream of thoughts, a sudden psychic pulse reverberated through the chamber. A wave of psychic energy rolled off of the throne like an ocean swell, crashing upon the stupefied master of mankind. Then a second pulse occurred, then another. It reminded the Emperor of a grossly magnified heartbeat, and it took the Emperor a split nanosecond to realize that was exactly what it was. In a profane parody of resuscitation, the throne was pouring psychic energy into the corpse, forcing its broken form to somewhat function. Slowly moving closer to his deceased counterpart, he wondered if it was possible that some parody of life still dwelled in the decayed thing in front of him. He got his answer when the corpse Emperor stirred to life. Its eye sockets suddenly glowed with supernatural light, while its attached arms slowly reached out towards him. The carcass's jaw fell open, and in a voice that could shatter worlds and dominate armies, it spoke. Emperor Atham the Revelation, Master of mankind, anathema to chaos, Augustus Imperator, Father of the Imperium, Lord of Terra and Mars, Omnisire, Lord of Perpetuals, Sire of Heroes and the New Man. I need to speak to you. Chapter 5. God Emperor. The Emperor stood still for a moment as a psychic shockwave hit him with the force of a thunderhammer. His senses were no longer obscured by the thing on the throne, and he could see the truly horrific nature of the corpse before him. The Imperium, as far as he could sense, was utterly glutted with the white-hot power of his doppelganger. The Emperor had been often likened to a supernova packed into a human form. Yet in this reality, his dying body could no longer hold his sheer psychic might, and that force was leaking out of him, smothering terror in unimaginable psychic power. This corpse Emperor had transcended the physical form and become a mass of sheer psychic energy. A shiver went down Atham's spine. This version of him was even further from human than he himself was. Before him was not a man, but a terrifyingly powerful creature, far more akin to the first races or those who dwell in the warp than the children of terror. He had been worshipped by countless cultures as a deity or something similar, due to his power and age, yet he had always spurned that accursed title. Countless beings had called themselves gods in ages past, and every single one of them had been undeserving of worship or adulation. Yet here he was, worshipped as a god, and more warp energy than man, barely tethered to the materium by a broken husk of a body. These thoughts and a million more swirled through the mind of the Lord of Perpetuals, in about the time a baseline human's reflexes would kick in. In other words, the Emperor was in a state of bewildered shock. Another wave of psychic energy cascaded into the corpse, and the Emperor watched as warp-born energy filled the husk cells and neurons, puppeteering them into a parody of life. The corpse Emperor spoke again, its tone devoid of emotion as it gestured with a wizened limb for the living Emperor to come closer. Surprise is understandable. None of our projections or visions depicted this outcome. The enemy ensured that we were blind to their twisted machinations. Yet we are not allowed such weakness and waste. I have a limited amount of time to convey a large amount of information in order to ensure our victory. Slowly stepping towards the mouthpiece of his future existence, the living Emperor let his mind touch with the pseudo-god before him. It was like touching the surface of the sun. Pain, excruciating, soul-shredding pain blasted through the Emperor. For both a split second and an eternity, he touched his counterpart's soul and felt what he felt and knew what he knew. Over 10 millennia of information and experiences were shoved into his mind. Tears began to flow down the living Emperor's face as the sheer horror of the heresy, the failure of the webway, and all of the crimes of the Imperium slammed into him. As suddenly as they had began, the memories ended. The knowledge had flowed into him in a blast of nightmares. The living Emperor's mind felt wrong. The visions were stored deep inside his labyrinthine brain, but not fully accessible to him. He had created thousands of memory locks like this in his time, but rarely had the master of mankind suffered from one. We implanted as much of our memory as we can access into you. It appears your limited form and emotions are not capable of handling such data all at once. We were so weak then, burdened by compassion, unable to transcend. You are us, but not us. This information is imperative to the survival of the Imperium, and will slowly trickle out as it becomes pertinent. Having all of it at the wrong times could destabilize you and cause errors we cannot afford. We will now answer every question you have and more. And the answer to your first question of how the future that is our present occurred is that the Primarch project failed. Still regaining his bearing, the living Emperor suddenly focused. The thing before revolted him, not just its necrotic existence or its suffering, but the way it spoke and acted. The being that sat on the golden throne was far too similar to the cruel pantheons of both Materium and Immaterium. The Emperor knew he was more powerful than any human to ever exist, but this psychic abomination had discarded what separated the Emperor from the countless god things he battled and sought to deny. The corpse Emperor had discarded its humanity and compassion. It was what he feared becoming most, a god emperor. You do not approve of what we are. We are this because of the mistakes you will make. The Primarchs will fail, and only war will be left. All we strived for will become naught but dust, leading to both Emperor and Imperium shall becoming rotten titans, desperately trying to delay the inevitable as the predators circle closer to our flock. The knowledge of this future is my gift to you, firstborn of terror. Learn from the mistakes and save us all. Steadying himself and steeling his soul, the living Emperor said, "So where do we begin?" In response to that, a cascade of images filled the Emperor's mind. As the God Emperor spoke, the most logical start is where our Imperium both truly started and failed, the Primarchs. Before his eyes, the Emperor watched the original timeline where the minions of chaos, riding the birth echoes of the Dark Prince, had destroyed the infant Primarch's protection, and how the Chaos Gods hurled them through the warp to the planets that would rear them. The living Emperor watched the childhoods of the Primarchs through the lens of their memories. He saw an equal mix of heroics and horrors. Some, like Aegis and 18, rose above the hellish nightmares they had been dropped into, while others, like 12 and 14, became as monstrous as their homeworlds. So that's how it was. The four not only stole and twisted them, but cast them onto broken worlds. The Emperor spoke with no emotion, and could plainly see how the rest of the tale would unfold. Betrayal, insanity, chaos, heresy, brother against brother, and the galaxy in flames. Why did we not stop them? A cruel youth does not dictate a life. Why did Malkador or I not intervene with the wayward ones? The God Emperor responded callously to the question, as if such a thought was unworthy of one who possessed their power. Have you deluded yourself? Have you forgotten the second purpose of the project? to cleanse yourself of weakness and humanity, to be a perfect leader of a new age. The Primarchs each hold a shard of your weakness to both empower them and elevate you. As they grow and develop, your humanity will wane. We designed this to offer them a level of protection from the ruinous powers and ensure humanity's path to survival. Shock flashed through the Emperor as he realized the mistake he had made. Each Primarch, when he rediscovered them, expected a teacher, a guide, even a father, and what they got was an inhuman Emperor. Taking a deep breath, the Master of Mankind asked, "How did you stop chaos from stealing them? How did you change the timeline?" Silence filled the throne room for a split second before holy flames burst into being across the gigantic chamber. Thousands of ethereal soldiers cloaked in fire flickered into existence at the base of the pyramid. Each wore ghoulish burnt power armor that seemed to be a more advanced version of his Thunder Legions. As one, the ghosts knelt before the golden throne, and the God Emperor spoke. While we lacked the Primarchs and their gene seed, enough samples survived for another weapon as great as they were to be born. The Primarchs may have been the greatest generals ever created, but the Legiones Astartes were the greatest army ever born of human stock. Even now, in the current era of the 41st millennium, they protect the dying Imperium as the Angels of Death. Each one is infused with their Primarch's gene seed and are modified not just on the biological and psychological level, but on a spiritual one, becoming ever so slightly linked to us in both life and death. Those who become lost in the warp can be touched by us and reforged as the Legion of the Damned. They are ones who save the Primarchs. Slowly, the ghosts faded out of existence like candles in the wind. The Emperor watched them go, observing the various barely legible Legion markings on them. Inverted omegas, lighting bolts, wings, blood drops, and a scant few custodes disappeared back into the immaterial as the corpse Emperor continued. The galaxy is dying. Chaos, Xenos, and other threats beyond even the most twisted nightmares of mortals are closing in. The war is lost, and all that can be done is delay the inevitable. Even as we speak, the doom of all creation creeps closer. The Despoiler's legions have ripped the galaxy in half, while the Locust hordes descend. Yet in their hubris, Chaos left a small gap in their armor, with their might focused on opening the Great Rift. We used the might of quadrillions of worshippers to cast my legion back into history, riding the same currents the first heretics did. The living Emperor's psychic senses stretched out beyond the terror to the galaxy at large, and he could feel the galaxy screaming. Billions were dying at the hands of monsters, and he could sense all of it. Every soul ripped from a screaming innocent to feed a never-born patron. Every child eaten alive by swarms of fanged Xenos. Every hopeless last stand where brave soldiers died screaming prayers and begging for salvation that would never come. The Emperor fell to his knees and let out a roar of righteous fury that shook terror to its core. He had experienced this exact same horror once before, when the Age of Strife dawned and the Federation fell. The Emperor of Man had been willing to cast everything aside, his morals, his oaths, even his humanity, to prevent another such calamity. Yet he had failed, standing again slowly, with tears slowly trickling from his golden eyes. He spoke in a tone that had ordered the deaths of entire worlds. "I will take this information you have gifted me. I will stop the grim darkness of the future from unfolding at all costs. The Imperium will ascend, no matter the price that must be paid." The corpse on the throne was still. The God Emperor's mission was complete, and now all that was left was for the Emperor to return to the dawn of the Imperium and end the long war before it could even begin.